Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Elementary. So this episode was about a predator of predators, but rather than referring to him as the predator of predators, I'll just refer to him as a vigilante. Essentially, he's a vigilante that targets specifically guys that go after underage children online and stuff like that. He basically catfishes them, draws them into a hotel, and then beats the smack out of them and puts them on camera, and it's like, okay, confess your crime to the world, until most of them do. Now, the victim in this episode, Damien, initially it's kind of like, oh man, this whole situation is like, oh, he must have been one of the targets because they found the red zip ties and everything, and so like, oh, this is kind of the whole setup as this New Jersey vigilante who did the similar thing. And so it looks like, oh, Damien must be a predator, but then it's like, nope, it turns out that Damien himself is the vigilante. So it's kind of like, oh, so the vigilante got caught, the predator got by the prey. So, which really quickly, I'll bring it up. The fact is, that guy at the beginning to do in the hotel, I didn't know where that was going. I was like, okay, it's like, obviously you can see the key signs that he's about to, he's kind of cheating on his wife or whatever, pulling off his ring and everything, lying, say he's doing something from work, when then obviously he's not, he's in the hotel room. I was just thinking like, okay, that's baseline going to be cheating, because it's like, oh yeah, hear those gunshots going off. I'm like, okay, so, but then at the same time, I'm like, but you're such a specific actor. I don't know the particular actor's name, but I've seen him in stuff from time to time. Like, he was in the first season of Ray Donovan. He was like the FBI agent that was going after Ray and Ezra pretty hard. But most recently, I saw him as Scar in Luke Cage. So I've seen him in stuff from time to time. So I was like, you're such a specific actor. I'm surprised they're not going to bring you back. But they do bring him back in the episode, because it's like, oh, he was in it. Wasn't in that hotel just to cheat on his wife. He's there to cheat on his wife of a 15-year-old. It's like, I mean, it's like, hey, I'm not going to judge you for cheating. I mean, I don't agree with it, but it's like, hey, you do you. That's not, it might be a moral thing, sure, but it's not. Cheating on your wife isn't necessarily a crime. Some probably would prefer it to be one, because it's like, you took vows and everything, but nevertheless, it's more of a moral thing. But then it turns into a crime thing, because it's like, oh yeah, you're trying to solicit a 15-year-old. And I love his defense of being like, well, it doesn't count because of like, well, it was a figment. You can't be charged for something that never happened with a figment. And it's like, and Captain Gregson was like, yeah, I won't tell your wife. And then Watson's like, you really not going to tell his wife? No, what I'm going to do is I'm going to arrest him. And then if it ends up popping up on the news and his wife ends up finding out, oh, well, I didn't tell her. So I kept my word. So I was like, you sly Captain Gregson, you. I was wondering how he was going to worm his way out of that. I thought, honestly, personally, I would have been like, I don't fucking care. I'll tell his wife. I will walk, knock on her door, and tell it to her, straight to her face. Like, I give a crap what this scum thinks. Like, I'm gonna keep it my promises to him. But hey, Captain Gregson's he's a better man than I am. So, but the case ended up getting more and more interesting, because you end up finding out that essentially, one of the people that he framed, one of the people he shamed, he basically lost everything, his job, his wife, his children don't even talk to him, even though they need money, because he's like, oh, they were totally asking me for money before, but the moment the video came out and everything, they stopped asking because they don't want anything to do with me, even though they know they need money. He just lost everything. And then he points out the fact is that around that same time, he was being sued for sexual harassment by a woman named Yvette. And then he's like, oh, this whole thing's a setup. And then they actually piece it together. Like, I'm like, it might have just been a setup, that Damien might have got it wrong, that basically he was a gun and that Yvette pointed him towards the target and fired. But it turns out Yvette's like, yeah, like, no, that's not right at all. Yes, I suing him for sexual harassment because he was a piece of crap boss and I wanted him to kind of suffer. It wasn't about the money for her. For her, it was mainly like, hey, he's a piece of crap and everyone needs to know he's a piece of crap. The way he talked to me, the way he just acted, he was just not a good guy. And then it turns out it's like, well, Yvette doesn't really have motive for it, because basically the settlement was for like $10 million, because basically after the whole situation of like that coming out, they basically fired him and settled, like the company he worked for, the dude's name was Jack, like basically they fired him and then settled out of court for like $10 million. But she didn't get that full 10 million. She basically had like another kind of company represent her. They fund all your lawyer expenses and stuff like that, get you the best lawyers and stuff like that. And upon winning your settlement, they get a large chunk of it. So she really didn't make that much. So it's like, if anyone's done any of this, if anyone's behind it, framing him or whatever, then it has to be them. And it turns out the person behind that is Damien's brother-in-law, who is interesting enough, Burton from Banshee. I was like, dude, the moment I saw, I was like, you look at you up here talking. I mean, if you've never watched Banshee, his throughout the entire series, you could probably count on one hand, well, probably two hands, the amount of times he's ever talked across 4 seasons. But that was just kind of the whole thing. Because I remember that even being a thing. They were like, oh yeah, we got like a well-trained, like, I forgot, he was like a maybe, I think, a Broadway actor, maybe. I know Hoon Lee, who played Joe, is one, I think, but it's like, no, he's a Shakespearean actor, and they've got him playing the character with like almost no dialogue. So that was kind of the whole joke thing. But nevertheless, I'm getting way off point here. But it's just super exciting to see. I was like, because I literally saw Matt Servito as well as Orange Thompson on, the Blacklist and everything. It's like, plus Anthony Starr on American Gothic. And I even saw, I can't remember, I think her name's Ivana. I know I'm going to mess it up. She's the actress who played Anna/Carrie. She was on like, I don't know if she's a main character, but I saw her pop up at least in 1 or 2 episodes I happened to catch of it. Was the show Power on Starz. So that was just kind of, nevertheless, it's just I have to nitpick every time I say it. It's like, I'm glad to see you doing other things, after Banshee and whatnot, just because that was kind of my hope and everything. But once again, I'm well off course here. Essentially, he's Burton. I'm just refer to him as that because I don't remember this, or I could just call him Damien's brother-in-law. But essentially, Damien's brother-in-law was kind of like, oh man, he's like, I can use this as an opportunity, especially when he found out, it's like, well, my brother-in-law is doing this whole thing. Well, mainly because it's like, why not use it to my own advantage? So he basically set Jack up, create a fake profile and everything, and that he'd help, Yvette win the case so they'd make more money. He wanted to make sure that Damien never found out, which Damien never did. And the interesting thing about it is they're like, so, his alibi for that is like, I couldn't have killed Damien because I was off committing another crime, trying to set him up and manipulate him into helping me with another, case where it's basically like, oh, send Damien after another person who is innocent and end up helping with the case and end up getting paid that way. So it's like, yes, I'm a disgusting, scummy person. Did I manipulate my brother-in-law? Sure. But did I kill him? No. So that's how you can always tell when someone's not guilty. It's like, I'll fess up to every other terrible thing I did, but I didn't murder anybody. Other people are very smart about it, where they were just like, nah, you can't. I mean, granted, they were hitting him with the evidence and stuff like that, so he can't deny what was also being said. But it's like the moment murder got asked, he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm going to be a scummy human being, but I'm not a murderer. So I just love how that's just kind of like where you draw the line. It's just kind of like not being just a scummy person, but being an extra scummy person, being a murderer or whatever. It's just like, to me, that's the line where you draw the line of like, oh, this is a line of scummy that I'm not willing to cross or whatever. So that's how I just see that. Really, I was kind of in the same boat as Sherlock in this episode, finding out who the real killer was. I was kind of like, oh, that sucked too when they start mentioning all the medication. And then I clicked at the same time. I was like, oh man, of course it's her. Of course it'd be the one person in the episode that you kind of like and everything, because she was super nice at the beginning. She's just like, oh yeah, my boss sucks. I hate this job. And he's like, hey, give me some information. He's like, I know you hate your job and you hate your boss. He's like, yeah, he's literally like a villain from a comic book, and she helped him out and everything. But then it turns out she's the one that killed Damon. And he was like, I know, not only do I know who killed her, he's like, even Sherlock was like, hey, I know who killed Damien. And the sad thing about it is I like her too. And Watson kind of gave him a look like, wait, what? And then you find out the reason why. Because apparently one of the 4 people that that Damon had shamed basically assaulted her in the past, and it took her a while to kind of gain up the courage to kind of come to the police tell them the truth and everything. But by the time everything was said and done, and they got the proof and evidence that they needed, well, because essentially with her case, the statute of limitations was up, but they found out someone else and someone else and someone else, so they were coming after him. But he was one of the 2 people that, when it was all said and done, because one guy was in a coma, the other guy got arrested for embezzlement, but the other 2 fled the country after the videos went up. He was one of the guys that ran away from the country, which she found out about the whole situation. That's why she kind of set the whole thing up with Damien, because she was so upset, because it's like that was her revenge and he took that from her. And it's like, she even said it herself, like she didn't want him to get killed. She didn't want to kill him, but it's like once he saw who she was, like he wasn't as scared anymore. He looked at her more like, you know, the way the guy who assaulted her did, as a victim. Part of me thinks, because Damien also had like a sister who went through the same thing, so maybe when he looked at her like a victim, really he was just looking at her like he did his sister. And it's just, you know, but still it didn't make what happened any easier for her. So it's just, like I said, it's kind of sad. Like, you understand why she did what she did, but it still doesn't justify it. It just kind of left a sour taste in your mouth. And you can tell it left a sour taste in Sherlock's mouth, because it's like, hey, I'm friending this cop and that guy's in a place with no extradition. Don't worry, this cop friend of mine is going to plant like a crap ton of cocaine on him. And it's like, I think in particular it was in Indonesia, and it's basically like, oh, they don't play with that. So he's basically going to be locked up in jail for a very, very long time. And he looked at Watson and is like, oh, you don't agree with my methods? And she's like, I didn't say anything, and continue peeling her apple. It's like, he said his reason for doing it was because it's like, hey, you know, it's like, it shows like he's a bad guy. So it's like, who's this, you know, there's good reason to believe he will commit the same crimes, you know, even if he goes, you know, going somewhere else. He's even more likely to do it now, because it's like, well, he doesn't have to worry about being charged for his original crime. So he feels like maybe he can get away with it because he's a creature of habit and just a terrible waste of space. But I also believe he did it for that girl, because it's like, her, you know, she wanted justice, and, you know, maybe in some shape or form it might not be the justice that she necessarily wanted, but at least he's going away for a very long time, because, like, you know, and it's kind of one of those things where it kind of shows you like vigilantes kind of do more harm than good. In that case, he did more harm than good, because it's like, you may have shamed him, but for her, she wanted to do it. She put so much, like, she went through so much. She even had to be put on like anxiety medication and other stuff because of everything that happened to her. And it's just because, you know, and her only way of getting peace of mind was by shaming him herself, by getting her power back with her own hands. And it's just like, Damien kind of took it away from her. Like, even like, it kind of coincides with the way he looked at her. It's like him taking that away from her probably made her feel like a victim again, because it's like, the moment she tries to stand up for herself, it kind of backfires in her face, and someone takes that away from her. So, but that was just that side of the episode. Another side of the episode was the whole Shinwell situation. Also, love how they casually throw in the fact is that Shinwell's going through Sherlock's suitcase of clothes and stuff like that, and they're like, oh, what's this hat? It's like, oh, I've never seen Sherlock wear that. I was like, have they ever done that before? Just a random like Sherlock associated stuff that they just kind of like casually just like, oh yeah, references, haha, and just throw it away, because, you know, that's kind of like, I'm surprised it didn't go like, oh yeah, he wore that back in his Scotland Yard days or something like that. You know, something like he actually wore it at some point, but maybe it's just kind of like he had it, but it was just for other reasons that we just don't know about. It's like maybe he's just weird and collects hats. Who knows? But basically, you know, trying to help Shinwell get a job, but it doesn't pan out, because it's like, hey, his history is being a convict, not really the best at helping get a job, but Joan isn't willing to give up on him, so she suggests to Sherlock, she's like, hey, we can always make him, you know, kind of help, you know, he could get get a job, learn a trade, and become his own boss. That way he doesn't really have to answer to anybody else or have to interview and stuff like it. It's like, oh yeah, what kind of job are you interested in kind of helping him with? He's like, well, he could always do what we do. And he's like, be a detective? She's like, well, yeah, I mean, you know, you've taught someone else. And he's like, wait, you know, and it worked out before. He's like, oh, are you using Kitty as an example? The woman that never graduated, burned a man's face, and is currently on the run. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it's like, she also uses herself as an example. It's like, you taught me, but he's like, in Sherlock's mind, it's like the potential was there. It's like, it's not something you just casually decide like, oh, I'm going to be a detective. You know, it's like, I mean, well, a consulting detective, you know, because I don't want to insult someone being like, oh, like being a police detective is as simple as that. But it's like doing their job. It's not like it just, oh, you just wonder upon it. It's like, no, it's a true calling. That basically Sherlock, the reason why it fits so well with Joan is because the potential was already there, and Sherlock saw it immediately. It's just like, well, how do you know? Like, you know, Shinwell doesn't have it. He's just like, I just know. He's like, she's like, you haven't even really been in a room. It's like, do I really need to be in a room with someone to really know people? You know, because how he analyzes people like that. And she brings it up to Shinwell. Shinwell quickly turns it down and even kind of throws it back in her face. Is like, yeah, I'm not always going to agree with everything you want me to. She's like, I know you won't. He's like, well, lately it seems like you're trying to like make me agree with everything. But she was kind of like, okay, and just left it at that. To me, the moment that happened later parts of the episode confirmed my suspicion. I was like, dude, you're totally covering up. Like, I've been suspicious of you since episode 1 because of that whole ending when you had the gun and everything. So I was like, obviously because of that ending, God, what was that character, that actor? I've seen him and stuff, but it was in Haven. I literally wrote his name in a comment one time. I don't remember his name. His character's name from Haven in season 3, that actor. I've seen his stuff from time to time. I was like, dude. But apparently him and Shinwell got some stuff planned. Like I said, I don't know whether it's Shinwell's idea to kind of go along with things or whether he got caught up in something. But I knew it from immediately in season, like the first episode of the season, that was kind of the case. And that's more so than anything the main reason. I was like, that's the reason why you're turning down Joan. I thought that immediately. I was like, either it's because of what he's associated with, and it's like Joan was talking all this stuff about how you have to study hard, how basically you have to be on call 24/7 for this type of particular job. It's because, he knew that basically he'd be at Joan's beck and call essentially, so he knew he wouldn't be able to get done what he needs to get done. Now that's me being pessimistic. The optimist in me is kind of like, well, the fact of the matter is he's keeping Joan at a distance because he appreciates what she's doing for him, but he doesn't want her to get caught up, especially because the dude's like, yo, that lady Joan, she works for the police, right? And he's like, oh, I hate for you to end up dead before we get done what we're going to do, because we got big plans. And it's like, what those plans entail, we won't really know until the future. But it's like, very interested to see like how that all plays out. Will Shinwell actually come to Joan and be like, yo, help me out? Or will it be kind of too late that basically the wheels are already in motion? And it's like, I doubt. I'm curious if the guy that he's working with is actually the boss, because I get the feeling like they're both grunts. That basically there's some bigger chess piece at play here. Like they're kind of pawns to a king who's out there kind of sitting on a throne. That's how I'm interpreting it. Maybe he is the boss. I don't know. We would just have to wait and see. I'm curious to see what that whole storyline turns out to be, I guess that's why he was a little more reserved than anything when Joan did offer to help him, was because he knew this situation was happening. Like, because it's like, the only way you could justify the way he was acting at the end of season 1 would be like, well, he is an ex-con, so maybe just those old habits are a little hard to die. Plus, he used to be part of the drug gang. He used to be a pretty high ranking. Wasn't he like a lieutenant or something in the gang he was a part of, that drug trade and stuff like that? He was pretty high up, so I don't know. Shinwell, what was it? The lady that was related to Shinwell, she was like a cousin or something like that, she did warn Joan to stay away from Shinwell because it's like whatever he's up to tends to get everyone else involved in everything. So it's kind of like it won't just be him that's mixed up in it. He'll drag you into it too. So be careful. So like I said, I'm very interested to see where that goes. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.